This is the Garden of Eden. This circular island, you see this? Cross-sectioned by 4 rivers. We're starting at the beginning. This is the book of Genesis. This is the Garden of Eden. There is the 4 rivers of paradise right here. Okay, you can see this is the Euphrates because it's split into 7 heads. This one, it's written in Latin. I've decoded all of this Latin. And it says this is the fastest of all the rivers. It's the Tiger River or the Tigris River, the fast-moving river. This one over here is equivalent to the ancient Nile. Okay, so the modern day Nile, the modern day place names, rivers, mountains, all of that, many of them, maybe most of them, have been renamed in honor of this ancient land. This is the original land. So we've got the Euphrates, the Tigris, the Nile. They go by many different names too, the Pishon, the Gihon, etc., right? In the middle, we have a magnificent, lofty, towering mountain, a black rock. Right? Which is exactly why your modern day company is called BlackRock and why they own everything. Okay. Those people that own that company are related to survivors who left this area and passed on secret information or just the truth to their family members, and they ingrained it within them to remember these things, specifically the apocalypse and the nature of our world, how all of this is actually created. Okay. But if we take a look at these ancient maps, we'll find that at the middle, at the North Pole, we have paradise, we have Hyperborea, 4 little island continents that create a circular continent with the mountain right there in the middle. This is the Urbano Monte map, the largest map that I've ever found that was made during the Dark Ages. Now you can see that this hidden land made it onto so many of these medieval maps, going from the Dark Ages all the way up to about the 1700s-ish, right around there. They started taking this map, this land, off of the maps. You guys might recall that we did a video describing and showing you the land of Jesus that was shown on ancient maps many different times. They had what they called the land of Jesus. It was another terra incognita. Here it is again on another ancient map of the world. You can see right smack in the middle the 4 rivers that cross-section the Garden of Eden. We have it again up here at the top, right? This one says Island of Pygmies. The Pygmies were the small people. They're dwarves. They're quite actually dwarves like you see in the Lord of the Rings. Sometimes they're called Skraelingers, and they go by other names as well. They're just the little people. Here's an ancient Asian map of the world that features the island at the top of the world up here on the sides. Here's another one. This one's called Typus Orbis Terrarum. And you can see up there at the top, they have the Garden of Eden, Hyperborea. I just call it by the popular name, okay? It's all of these. Here it is again at the top of this map. This one's a bit more modern. It says Terre, that's earth or land. Here you can see the mountain range that encircles the Garden of Eden, acting as the walls. These are the walls of Eden. It's not just a mountain range that you could just, hike over or whatever. These are vertical cliffs that surround the entire island, making it very difficult to get through. Terra polaris pars. Pars as in a part of the land. Here's the first globe ever made. Guess what they put on the first globe ever made? Even when they were changing the map, and even when they were messing with cosmology, they made sure to include this region. We've got Mercator's map of the Arctic. There it is right there in the middle. That's one of my favorite depictions of the land at the North Pole. Here is a portrait of Mercator holding a globe, and at the top of that globe is the Holy Mountain with a little circle in the middle of it, right? And then the 4 lands right there. This one's called Region Hyperboreae. The region of Hyperborea. Like I said, this central land goes by many different names. 90 degrees north, that's the Split Mountain. They even make it a split mountain. This is Wolf Mountain. It's portrayed and personified as the head of a wolf that's howling up at the apex dome. But as you can see, it's split right there in the middle. That's because it's a plasma volcano. There's not a volcano that spews out lava and stuff. It spews out light. It spews out gases that are ionized and become a pillar, beams of plasma that shoot straight up from that particular mountain.
If we do a quick search through raremaps.com's massive inventory for more like it, we find dozens of similar depictions. Here is one by Dutch cartographer Cornelis de Jode in 1593, another from one of the founders of the Dutch East India Company, Petrus Plancius in 1594, and one last example, Abraham Ortelius's 1570 world map and what is considered the first modern atlas. So where did these depictions originate? Just as Terra Australis in the south, this mysterious land to the north can be traced back to ancient Greek writers. It was called Hyperborea, which loosely translates to beyond the north wind. These ancient writers didn't unanimously agree on everything about Hyperborea, including its location, other than it was to the north. One of the legends was that the sun rose and set just once a year, indicating that it was somewhere within the Arctic Circle. Despite this, it was also said to enjoy a moderate climate. Some of its other characteristics included having strong connections to Apollo, and being home to people as tall as 10 feet, that could live to be 1,000 years old. It was allegedly nearly invaded by an army of 10 million men from a neighboring island, but the army turned back when they realized the Hyperboreans could not be defeated. That's more than 5 times the number of soldiers that landed in Normandy in the first 3 days of the Allied invasion in World War II, which is generally accepted as the largest seaborne invasion in history. 2,000 years later, there were still stories about a mythical land to the north, though some things had changed. Let's go back to that first map shown, which is the most well known. It was created by someone you've probably heard of. Even if you don't recognize the name, you're at least familiar with his work. His name is Gerardus Mercator. He's known for his famous projection created for navigation that makes Greenland look like the size of Africa. It's also commonly used in classrooms and by navigational apps like Google Maps. However, as you can see on his world map, it would have been difficult to use for navigation in the Arctic region, though he did make a more accurately depicted Arctic region as an inset. But trade had been increasing over the 16th century between Europe and the East Indies, and it was a long journey between them. The route at the time was south and around Africa. A northeast passage could reduce shipping times to and from the East Indies from 2 years or more to about 6 months. It would also help avoid many hazards such as run-ins with rival nations, wear and tear on ships, tropical diseases, and the still mysterious disease scurvy. 1 in 5 ships and 1 in 3 employees of the Dutch East India Company never came back from the round Africa route. With the growing interest, Mercator dedicated a map to the Arctic, which was actually published by his son Romuald Mercator in 1595, the year after Gerardus' death. It's also the first standalone map of the Arctic region. Mercator, and probably other cartographers going at least as far back as 1492, got their information from a book titled Itinerarium, which was written by Jacobus Noyen. This book summarized a travelogue titled Inventio Fortunata, meaning Fortune Discovery. This book was by a 14th century Franciscan friar and mathematician who claimed to have explored the region in 1360 on behalf of Edward III of England. Johannes Rous cited Inventio Fortunata on his 1507 world map. But Jacobus Noyen never actually saw this book. He received this information from a priest who said he had met the author of Inventio Fortunata when the man gave him an astrolabe in exchange for a Bible. Mercator wrote on his world map, "We have taken the Arctic geography from the Itinerarium of Jacobus Noyen of the Hague, who makes some citations from the Gesta of Arthur of Britain. However, the greater and most important part he learned from a certain priest at the court of the King of Norway in 1364. In 1577, Mercator wrote a letter to English astronomer John Dee about the Arctic region and referenced Itinerarium once again. In this letter, he wrote, "In the midst of the 4 countries is a whirlpool, into which there empty these 4 indrawing seas, which divide the north. And the water rushes round and descends into the earth just as if one was pouring it through a filter funnel. It is 4 degrees wide on every side of the pole, that is to say, 8 degrees altogether, except that right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. Its circumference is almost 33 French miles, and it is all magnetic stone, and is as high as the clouds, so the priest said, who had received the astrolabe from this Minorite in exchange for a testament, and the Minorite himself had heard that one can see all round it from the sea, and that it is black and glistening, and nothing grows thereon, for there is not so much as a handful of soil on it. The friar also claimed to have encountered pygmies. It's unclear if the original book, Inventio, is the source of this concept about the North Pole. A similar story was written by the historian Gerald of Wales in the late 12th or early 13th century. Here is what he had to say. Not far from the isles towards the north, there is a monstrous gulf in the sea, towards which all sides the billows of the sea, coming from remote parts, converge and run together as though brought there by a conduit. Pouring into these mysterious abysses of nature, they are as though devoured thereby, and should it happen that a vessel pass there, it is seized and drawn away with such powerful violence of the waves that this hungry force immediately swallows it up, never to appear again. By the 1630s, Mercator's depiction of the region disappeared from maps, due to real discoveries and competing theories about the region. Holes in the story were even appearing to Mercator. While the magnetic rock seemed like a somewhat logical explanation as to why a compass would point north, this wasn't actually where the magnetic North Pole was located. Mercator knew this, and tried to explain away the discrepancy by adding a second rock. But it would still be nearly another 300 years of theories, rumors, and lies about the geography of the Arctic.
In this video, I'm going to show you several astonishing lost maps of ancient Africa and the Sahara, which blew me away, as what's shown on these maps is simply not supposed to be possible, and the implications of which are absolutely enormous, as you'll see by the end of this video. Why on earth does a map that was created closer to 500 years ago, and which also happens to be one of the world's first ever maps to depict the entire continent of Africa as a whole, clearly illustrate lakes, rivers, and even a dense forest the size of Texas in the middle of the Sahara Desert, which, needless to say, is obviously far different than the vast, barren, continental-sized desert that we all know it for today. It must be mentioned that considering that this map was created by Sebastian Münster, who has been said to be one of the most influential cartographers of the 16th century, as he was the first person to print separate maps for each continent around the world. This caused me to go down the so-called rabbit hole in search of the oldest maps of Africa, and I could not believe just how many show the Sahara saturated with lakes, rivers, and even numerous cities and settlements scattered throughout the region. Whether it be this striking map created in 1482 by German printer Reinhard Holl, and upon closer inspection, you can see not only rivers and lakes, but numerous cities blanketing the entire region. Again, what on earth is all of this doing in the middle of the Sahara on a 500-year-old map? In fact, there are others which show walled cities and even castles throughout the region as well. What you're looking at here is the Catalan Atlas, a medieval world map from the year 1375 that was once within the Royal Library of France. And by the way, that is Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, the richest man ever known to have existed in all of human history. In fact, nearly twice as wealthy as Elon Musk. But that aside, the very nature of all these cities in the middle of the Sahara, annotated on a map that is nearly 650 years old, is intriguing to say the least. So you can distinctly see that most of the Sahara is absolutely teeming with cities. Where did all of these civilizations go? I have to say that I find this map to be quite interesting, and I will come back to it later in this video as there is a significant detail that must be discussed. Take this map created by Italian engraver Fernando Bertelli in 1565, which blatantly shows 3 massive lakes connected by a river system. Upon a closer inspection, clearly shows the Sahara Desert buzzing with cities that follow along a system of rivers and lakes, again, on a map that was created more than 500 years ago. I think I'm starting to notice a pattern here. And if what I've showed you so far isn't already strange enough, this is where things get even more interesting and will continue to escalate through the rest of the video. The Sahara Desert was green and tropical as recently as 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. Why is there a map created in the year 1502 literally showing a green Sahara? This is a Portuguese world map called the Contino Planisphere, named after Alberto Contino, and smuggled to Italy from Portugal well over 500 years ago. Honestly, how have I never seen or heard of this map before? And why on earth does it so blatantly display the Sahara with such a lush tropical environment? And if you look closely, you can clearly see the details of trees and vegetation within. Here is something that may blow your mind. which is the discovery of the world's largest freshwater lake ever known to exist, was also located in the middle of the Sahara and dates back 5,000 years and is referred to as Mega Lake Chad, which I have touched on in prior videos. Just consider the general region of Lake Chad's location, which is in modern-day country of Chad, and compare it to these old maps. And now consider this important detail, which is that Mega Lake Chad was actually the largest of 4 paleo lakes in the Sahara. Is that not what this map is showing, and inexplicably 500 years prior to its discovery in modern times? And if that isn't interesting enough, consider what I discussed moments ago related to the various maps I just showed you that clearly annotate a network of rivers traversing east and west through the middle of the Sahara, along with those areas teeming with civilizations, including obvious cities and settlements everywhere in between. Well, isn't it curious that a modern scientific study from within just the last decade identified a paleo river system of 3 large rivers that once existed in the middle of the Sahara and would have likely have supported ancient human migration routes from 5 to 11,000 years ago. As some of these maps are actually based on the work of Ptolemy, who created this map in the year 150 AD, closer to 2,000 years ago. Did this river exist at that time, or was Ptolemy passing down ancient knowledge from even older source maps that may have existed or been created thousands of years before his time? Consider the 1452 map of Sebastian Münster and refocus your attention away from the rivers, lakes, and forests and observe what is shown in the Western Sahara and in the same geographical location of the Richat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara as it's more commonly called. A spectacular geological feature unlike any other on Earth, and perhaps one of the most mysterious and bizarre structures in the world, which I have of course discussed at length on this channel as I have compared its striking similarities to the legend of the lost city of Atlantis. But never mind the topic of Atlantis and consider one thing and one thing only for a moment, which is the question as to whether this map is showing the Richat while consumed with water. In fact, here is a similar map created by Heinrich Bunting in the year 1581, which seemingly shows a river leading from the Atlas Mountains in North Africa and consuming the Richat with water. But if that's not compelling enough, take a look at this other map of northern Africa while under the rule of the Roman Empire, which again seemingly details a river originating from the Atlas Mountains and appears to be arguably consume the Richat structure with water based on its circular nature and location, and also depicts it flowing out to the Atlantic Ocean. And this is where it gets wild, because we now know through recent scientific studies that the ancient Tamanrasset River flowed from the Atlas Mountains and widened some 500 kilometers or just over 300 miles all the way to the Atlantic and directly in the path of the Eye of the Sahara as far back as 11,700 years ago, before it mysteriously dried up approximately 5,000 years ago. Only thing stranger than all the various maps that I've shared with you throughout this video is the fact that so few people have ever even seen or heard of them before. But the very fact that virtually none of them are taught in school and that their contents are not included in modern debates involving Earth's climatical history, it seems to me that their absence in these conversations is highly unfortunate. Honestly, I think these maps stand to upend much of the modern discussion of our climate, which has sadly become highly political in recent times. I mean, where did all of the rivers, lakes, forests, and cities in the middle of the Sahara go? Definitely leave a comment and share your thoughts on everything that's been discussed in this video. Are these maps showing evidence of a lost ancient knowledge that from several thousand years earlier involving Earth's climatical history? Or is it possible that the Sahara Desert's climate was vastly different some 500 and 600 years ago? Definitely something fun to think about.
Yeah.